Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Henry C. Wells Awards Ceremony, which is the kickoff to Celebrate, Commemorate weekend. At this time, I would like to recognize our Mayor, Ted Young, the rest of the Village Board of Trustees, Dave Dupre, Bonnie Hosford, a special welcome to the ones seated behind me, but you will be introduced to them shortly. At this time, I would ask Josh to come forward. He will present the award to Bill Velte for the Henry Wells recipient.
Good evening, Presidents Roosevelt and Lincoln, Waterloo Library and Historical Society President Bill Sigrist, our guest of honor, Bill Velte, and Miss Barton. Friends, thank you for coming out this evening. I'm honored to speak on behalf of the Waterloo Library and Historical Society tonight. The Wells Murray Award is named after the founders of Memorial Day. Two dedicated, inspirational community members who had a solemn vision to honor the brave men and women who gave their lives defending our freedom. Each year, this award is dedicated to a member of our community who demonstrates similar leadership traits. A community member who chooses service above self, one who will inspire future generations to grasp aesthetic appreciation and devotion to their community. It is a pleasure to announce the 2011 Wells Murray Award will go to Mr. William Bill Velte, Jr. Mr. Velte is a U.S. Army veteran, a retired, successful Waterloo business owner, a member of the Waterloo American Legion, VFW, a member of the Waterloo Rotary Club for almost 50 years. He helped found the Waterloo Merchants Association, an organization that worked hard to promote downtown business and maintain aesthetic atmosphere, and also served on the committee to establish Waterloo as the birthplace of Memorial Day back in 1966. Mr. Velte, the people of Waterloo are thankful for your inspiration and your non-stop, community-minded character. By embracing your philosophy of service, we may move forward into the future with confidence that our great Waterloo will maintain its beauty. Now, on a more personal note, I know Mr. Velte personally and his wife, Sheila, because they live across the street from me. Now, I haven't owned my house for too long, but they have helped me out so much. I have one of those garbage cans that has the two wheels on them. Well, when I bought the house, it came with a house. Only one of the wheels worked, so I had to drag it out lopsided and then put the other wheel on when I got it up to keep it balanced. I came home from school one day and that thing was all bolted and bracketed together. But I have to tell you, Mr. Velte told me tonight that he had to fix it again. I didn't know it. So the thing is bulletproof now. The man has the best lawn on my street, and probably one of the best lawns in Waterloo. And when I mow my lawn, sometimes I miss a few spots. You know, the ones, the grass that kind of grows a little bit longer and it's a little bit obvious. And Mr. Velte is very good about coming up and making sure it's always. And he grows the biggest zucchinis in town. So I'd like to ask Mr. Velte to come on up to accept his award. And I'm going to read it, okay, so everyone can...
The only reason you're doing this is you're probably going to raise my taxes.
We'll talk about that later. All right. The plaque says, the Henry C. Wells Award, presented to William V. Velte, Jr. This award is bestowed upon that citizen of Waterloo, New York, who embodies the character and commitment of the founder of Memorial Day, Henry C. Wells, toward the betterment of our community, from the Waterloo Library and Historical Society.
Thank you very much. I tried to figure out what I could talk about, and I decided that Waterloo downtown is the only thing I can talk about because that's where I've been. I was, in the late 30s, I was in a house right in Chino's parking lot that they tore down. And then in 48, I went to Nugent and been downtown ever since. Let me tell you, when I was in that house on Main Street, when that fire horn went off, I raised about a foot out of bed and came down with a pillow over my head. But most of my life, you know, was spent in Nugent's. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about Nugent's was Sumner's dress shop before 1932. And in 1932, Nugent's, Allen and Nugent's moved from Maxie Goodman or Rudolph's over to Nugent's. And the first day I went to work there, Ed Smith hired me, and he said, you know, Bill, he's going to pay me $28 a week. And he says, Bill, he says, you know, if we have another recession, you might have to take a cut in pay. So, but next door to me, so I was told, was Jake Brooks's clothing store. And Jim Baker told me that Gene Sarazan would stop in there when he went through 5 and 20, and because they sold his clothes. Just a little note in case you didn't know. At that time, the VFW was upstairs on the 3rd floor over Lux's and the B&B, and so the VFW started out there in Waterloo, and so they ended up buying Commander Sweet's house on Elijah Street, and they made a mistake of not emptying the bag that was sanding the floor, and it burned that gorgeous house down. Commander Sweet would call the store and say, send over 5 pounds of oakum. Well, he was a Navy man, and he would take the oakum and put it in his furnace in the air and blow it through the house so it would smell like the inside of a ship. So another unique thing that in my time was between the Top Hat and the Savannah Bank now, there was Green's Trolley Car Diner. It was there for quite a few years. And another unique thing was the village office. The village office was George Collins's and then Don Eschenauer's automobile place. And it had a huge, great big canopy over the top of it, coming out all the way out to the street. And then next, there was 3 houses there. And that Morris Perro tore down. He tore down 2 houses, and then they moved one down around on Locust Street by the canal. And Morris built that gorgeous building that with the auto parts and stuff. And the other unique store I always had a good time in was Jim Baker's Ye Old Country Store. And that was in next to Tally Ho now, where the bank is. And next to that was also a Ben Franklin store right in the bank. The bank was very small at that time. But one day I went over to Jim Baker's store for lunch, and Fred Turk was working there, and we're sitting there, and all of a sudden, and Fred gets up and jumps up, and he says, "I gotcha." He put a spool of thread in the box and pinned it to the back of the sweater, and the guy stole the sweater, and it was going out the door with the sweater. There was Billy Walters. After he retired, he was an elderly gentleman, and he would walk around. He delivered papers, and he'd go to the police department, the hospital, all the stores and everything, and he'd tell you all the gossip, the babies that were born, who died. He'd go to and give you all of that. Another interesting fella was Ernie Bell. I don't know if anybody remembered Ernie, but Ernie Bell, every Memorial Day, it didn't make any difference. He, all by himself, he'd get his drum and he'd go all the way up to the cemetery, all by himself. Of course, another interesting thing was Bill Bailey. When we were in high school, we tried to sneak down around behind Janung's and look through the window so we could see Bill Bailey. It was really unique. We had a lot of businesses in downtown Waterloo when I first started there, like McMahon's Shoe Store and Zona's and Mary Durkin's clothing store and Tars. And the Grange Hall was always interesting because we used to work till Saturday nights till 9 o'clock, and so every Saturday the downtown would be full. All the farmers would come to the town and the Grange at the Grange Hall. I hope someday somebody does something with it before it gets too far out of whack. Some of the at that time there was 17 bars and grills in Waterloo. That's right inside the village at that time. And we had, outside the village, we had 6 little community stores that all did everything, you know. Another interesting thing was the Brunswick Hotel on the other corner. That was a nice old hotel, and that burned with the fire. Another thing, some of the fires in Waterloo, Bagshaw's lumberyard, when that burned down, that was a huge fire. The Franklin House was a huge fire. I always wondered why the wagon works didn't go. The huge big wagon works, and they ended up tearing it down. So, and I saw the Baptist church. The west wall in the Baptist church across from the Methodist here, that wall was bowled out, and they tore that down without hurting the McClickhouse house. It was quite a thing. So, and you go around the corner. I can't say enough about the project that Vern Sessler did to save downtown Waterloo. That whole block, the Mazzoli and Oddfellows and Sempner's. He did a fantastic job. He had to be awake nights just thinking of how he was going to do the inside of that building to get it come out. A bunch of us told him one time, we said, "Vern, you should put apartments upstairs in it." But Vern had his idea, and he wanted to have nice little shops and all the way through the whole thing, and that's what he did. And he saved, really. He is a great Waterlooian. He saved downtown Waterloo, I think, by a lot. So, other than that, I want to thank the library board for doing this for me. I've always enjoyed what I was doing. When I started sweeping the streets, I only did in front of Nugent's. then next thing you know, I went a little farther and a little farther, and then finally I was getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I was going from the Legion to Bertino's to Janong's to the church. Then I opened the store up. So at this time, I would like to present the Waterloo Library. Oh, one thing, Ed Callahan has been helping me help sweeping the streets. And I said to Ed the other day, I said, Ed, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to see Teddy Youngs and tell him to send you the check the same as he sent me. Thank you. Thank you again. The Historical Society. What else can I say? I have one thing I'd like to do. I sweep my broom and shovel, and I'd like to present it to the Waterloo Historical Society.
Thank you, Mr. Velte. Well-deserved recipient of this award. At this time, I would like to introduce a very important young lady. Attending the event for the first time this year is Clara Barton. Upon learning about the suffering and need of her boys during the war, she sprung into action, collecting warehouses full of food, clothing, and supplies for the troops. As the angel of the battlefield, Clara Barton tended the wounded in the Civil War, changing the role of women, and in 1881, she founded the American Red Cross. Clara gives glimpses of her strong, determined character, her fight for equality for women, and her unyielding devotion to the men in the military. Please welcome Clara Barton.
Good evening, and thank you for asking me to speak at the Henry C. Wells Award reception. I want to add my congratulations to Mr. Velte for the years of volunteer service to the people of Waterloo, New York, and I wish that you were my neighbor. Dedicated volunteers are essential to the well-being of our nation. I have devoted my life to volunteering for our country in many different ways. During the Civil War, I collected food, clothing, blankets, tents, and medical supplies for the Union Army. Many women also helped out by knitting socks, cooking jams and preserves, and baking bread for the poor, hungry soldiers. At the battlefields, I cooked soup, applesauce, gruel, and even apple pies for these lonely men. I helped the surgeons in their terrible operations, soothed fevered foreheads, and comforted the dying. So many women helped out at home and near the battlefields that President Lincoln once said, "Without the help of the women, the rebellion could not have been put down, nor the country saved." After the war, mothers were searching for their lost husbands and sons. Women were searching for their friends and lovers. I helped these people find their missing men by posting lists of names of these missing soldiers. Then thousands of letters poured into my missing soldiers' office, and I tried to connect information which I would receive with their loved ones. Although the government helped to pay me for some of my supplies and my postage, I volunteered all of my time to this effort. In 1881, I helped to found the American Red Cross and became its first president. The inspiration for the founding of the International Red Cross in 1864 came from a young Swiss man named Jean-Henri Dunant, who in 1859 found himself at the scene of a fierce battle between French and Austrian troops in Solferino. The horrible memory of thousands of men dying for want of the simplest care moved him to write a book entitled Un Souvenir de Solferino. In it, he denied the glory of the battlefield and said that the glory belonged to the peasant women who treated both sides alike, murmuring, "All are brothers." Dunant asked, wouldn't it be possible, in time of peace and quiet, to form relief societies for the purpose of having care given to the wounded in wartime by devoted and thoroughly qualified volunteers? When the American Red Cross was formed, in addition to serving in times of war, we added to our charter the goal of giving aid in times of natural disasters, such as fires, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes. I would like to tell you a story which describes this help. During the Ohio River flood in February of 1884, I was especially moved when I learned of 6 young children from Waterford, Pennsylvania, who had put on a show and raised $51.65 for the victims of the flood. I carefully set this money aside until I could find just the right person to give it to. One day, when we were in a small town in Illinois, a woman named Mrs. Plew came aboard our ship. She told us that she had lost her house and her husband in the flood, and now she and her 6 children were living in a corn crib. I told Mrs. Plew about the money that the 6 young children had raised and promised that the Red Cross would put enough money with it so that she could build a home for her family. Mrs. Plew was so grateful for our help. Later, when I visited their family, I found a sign next to their house that read, "The Little 6 Red Cross Landing." This story serves to show that no one is too young to volunteer. No time is too little, no money is too little. If each of us finds some way to volunteer as our own interests and talents guide us, this world will be a much better place to live in. And not only will you find that you are helping others, but you will also feel the immense satisfaction and joy which comes from sharing yourself with those in need. Again, I want to thank Mr. Velte for your years of volunteering, and I thank all of you who are following in his footsteps. Thank you.
Our next speaker, President Abraham Lincoln, our 16th president, served during the Civil War and is credited with freeing the slaves and working to preserve our great Union. President Lincoln was a devoted family man, a shrewd and determined politician, and a private and troubled individual burdened by personal loss and national tragedy. Please welcome President Abraham Lincoln.
Among the lovers of liberty are those who volunteer for public service in a variety of capacities, often at great personal sacrifice. Thus, it is with those who volunteered at the outset of the rebellion. Ever mindful of this, or of those early days of this fiery trial, upon my election, before I even took office, several southern states rebelled against the Union, Following my inauguration, Hut heads in the South Carolina, opened fire upon Fort Sumter in Charleston Harbor. When I sent ships to the fort carrying only provisions. Now, as president, it is my duty not only to provision garrisons under federal authority, but also to supply them with arms and munitions as required by any military outpost. This attack on federal property and its ultimate seizure signaled the outbreak of the conflict in which we are currently engaged. I have to say that when the war first started, some members of my cabinet and even members of the Congress were insistent that we should just let the South go. Let them leave, we don't need them. But I reminded them that we could not let them set up housekeeping for themselves. Because if a state were to secede, and what was to stop that state from, that new state from seceding from their confederation and such. And so I could not allow that to happen. It would destroy the country. Our capital, Washington City, shares one boundary with Virginia, a state which is in rebellion, and 3 other sides with Maryland, a border state with allegiances which could easily be split. This placed our seat of federal government in a precarious situation. Our standing army was small and inadequate to the defense of Washington City, to say nothing of the rest of the country's federal military establishments. It was obvious that a call for volunteers was necessary to quell the conflict. By authority of the Constitution, it seemed fit and proper to assemble a military force sufficient to suppress the rebellion. Therefore, a few days after the attack on Fort Sumter, I called for 75,000 volunteers from several states of the Union. Now, waiting for the arrival of these troops was an exercise in patience. A week or more passed with no word from anyone. I paced the halls of the White House and haunted the telegraph office. And yet, I heard nothing. I began to believe there was no North. Although none of the governors sent any telegrams alerting me to their states, efforts to raise regiments or to preserve the Union, such work was underway. Massachusetts was first to arrive less than 2 weeks after my call, because its former governor had the foresight to prepare local militia against this day. No sooner had my call gone out than Massachusetts volunteers embarked for Washington. New York regiments arrived within a few days of Massachusetts boys, and my fears for the capital were relieved. Soon, every vacant space in Washington was filled with tents and troops, and the movement to end the rebellion of the South was underway. Anyone can make a nation, but can it be sustained? Crowned heads of Europe have watched for nearly a century to see if we fail. This rebellion is a test of the viability of our nation, and it will not be successful except by the efforts of volunteers. Thank you.
Our next speaker, President Theodore Roosevelt, is back for the second year for Celebrate, Commemorate. The 26th President of the United States is credited with establishing the National Park Service, breaking up trusts, and ensuring the construction of the Panama Canal. Please help give a warm welcome to Mr. Theodore Roosevelt.
Thank you. I am delighted to be here in Waterloo, New York tonight. Indeed, I am honored that Mr. Dave Dupre asked me to say a few words for you folks tonight. However, I'm surprised that Mr. Dupre, with his civic experience, would give me such an opportunity. You see, I'm a political animal, and to ask a politician to say a few words is to like ask a congressman to stop spending your tax dollars. You can ask, but it's not likely to happen. I will endeavor, however, to control myself and say but a few words, as I'm not running for office at present. One of the assets of the American character is that in time of need, crisis, or when something simply needs to be done, the American takes action. He does something. Another asset is that the American character finds something in here that makes him respond to needs of his neighbors. A third asset of we Americans is that we understand that community has value, and that if we are a real part of the community, we are an asset to that community. We add value to that community. Blessed is the state, the town, the neighborhood, who has citizens neighbors who understand such an ideal. Blessed is the community in which its people see a need, understand that some action needs to be taken, and they endeavor to do it, rather than wait for some knight on a white horse to come riding up to the rescue. Blessed is the community who has people who realize that we can't stand around waiting for a government agency, a charitable agency, a church agency, or any other agency to come and tell us what to do. We take it by the horns and we get on with it. Blessed is the community that looks no further, that its people look no further than in their own mirrors to find someone who can help in time of need and will give it the best effort they have to responding to any crisis or endeavor or achievement that comes up. The Wells Award says that Waterloo, New York is a blessed community. I dare say that there has been nothing achieved of worth, of value in this community in the last 100 years, which hasn't benefited from one volunteer stepping forward or 100 volunteers stepping forward. If you want to see real American heroes, you don't have to wait for the media to show you or tell you who they are. You simply look around here at the faces of your neighbors and friends. There's real American heroes for you. These are the faces of people who know what it is to volunteer and knows what they add to a community by having that volunteer spirit, that in some capacity they make this place, Waterloo, New York, a better place to live. We honor tonight Mr. Velte, who by his efforts deserves this recognition, for he has in his way made this community a better place to live. I am sure that he's grateful for it, and I'm also sure that he would probably be the first to say there's a long line of citizens in this community who deserve similar recognition. Even if they don't seek it, they deserve it. And I am sure that from your appearance here tonight, honoring Mr. Velte, and the things that are to come this weekend, showing what spirit Waterloo, New York has, the Waterloo, New York will be blessed with the volunteer spirit for decades to come. Thank you very much for your time.
program